So I'm in Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan, the country which is driving in many ways the reforms within Central Asia itself, and the man driving the reforms within Uzbekistan is President Mirziyoyev, who of course called for that referendum that people had gone and voted for, because there is supposed to be a renewed constitution, a new constitution for Uzbekistan. As you can see, I'm dressed in the Uzbek ikat, the national in fact textile design as well. And I have on this episode with me Dr. Beruniy Alimov, who is the founder and director of the New Media Education Center, which is an NGO. He writes, he's been a journalist. Dr. Alimov, first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to speak on this podcast, and I believe that you have very strong India connections.
Yes, first of all, welcome to Tashkent. Namaste.
Namaste.
Frankly speaking, yes, I was studying at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication exactly 30 years ago.
Wow.
So I was happy to study there because I am always, proud of that I have Indian education as a journalist.
You studied there for 1 year, or did you stay on after that also?
It was 1 year course. It was called News Agency Journalism course.
And this was which year?
1993, 1994.
So he was there from 1993 to 1994, and I was in IIMC from 2002 to 2003. So we are actually alumni of the same network.
Yes, you're lucky.
That's good to know this connection.
Yes.
So coming to Uzbekistan today, when we talk about a renewed constitution, how much of it is a new constitution? How much of it is an old constitution? How much of it is a revised constitution?
Okay, let me just speak as a journalist, as a media expert on that sense, because I know what was, for example, censorship in this country for during my 30 years of experience in the media sphere. Yeah, there were even taboo topics like even ecology 30 years ago when I was working as a proofreader at a newspaper. I remember very clearly, I wrote an article about ecology problem in the north of the country where I come from. I wrote about the gujum tree. It's a very ancient tree, but they were dying at that moment. But the editor of the newspaper kept that article for 6 months. I remember that, But now, of course, you can write about ecology. It's open. It's not anymore taboo. And regarding the censorship itself, I remember when I was again working at the newspaper, there was a kind of guy who had to sign before publishing. I was also at that after that period I was working on the national television as a news anchor. Before going even live on television, we always should go to the person and ask permission, to tell something, But nowadays, physically, we don't have it. In Uzbekistan, we are changing, and especially on the new constitution, it says that the government will guarantee the freedom of journalism, freedom of speech. When, for example, if you are a journalist, when you gather information, when you edit, when you distribute your information, government will help you. Government will guarantee, because as you may heard, the government has very strong power in this country. So in this regard, I believe that the new constitution will help, first of all, journalists to work more free.
Let me rewind slightly for the listeners of this podcast. When Dr. Alimov talks about the last 30 years, for those of you who do not follow the Central Asian politics very, very closely, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, he has been the president since 2016 following the death of Islam Karimov. Now, Islam Karimov's term was an autocratic regime. It was a repressive regime. Interestingly, though, President Mirziyoyev has always been considered as Karimov's protege. But unlike Karimov, President Mirziyoyev has been focusing on freedoms, on guarantees for citizens. Now, there are arguments, of course, that many of them could be token, many of them could be symbolic, but the point is that there are significant changes that have happened on the ground. So, and in fact, under Karimov, President Mirziyoyev had served as prime minister too. He had served as governors of some of the districts, of some of the regions. There are 14 regions in Uzbekistan. So, when you talk about the 30-year period, it's essentially President Karimov, the period preceding him. Did you have any private media at all during those days?
Of course, we had a private media, but not as much as we have now, because we have before. If we have had about let's say 10 private media, we have now more than 500 free private media we have. Most of them, of course, internet media, because people are not buying any more newspapers, traditional newspapers. But now, of course, there are a lot of private media, owners who own the, internet publications like Kunuz, for example, or Gazeta Uz, Kalamper Uz, a lot of very popular, and people are less reading newspaper. They are mostly watching podcasts, they are watching television, and etc.
I hope some of the Uzbek people also tune in for our podcast. But the idea of the referendum really is not new to this region. Referendums have been used. In 1995, there were referendums in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, where we saw the presidential term get extended. In 2002, in fact, President Karimov also took the path of the referendum instead of election to extend his term. Why am I talking about this? Because what happens is President Mirziyoyev, he essentially is into the second term of his office. Now, under the current constitution, the president is allowed to run for 2 consecutive terms, and each term is up to 5 years. But with the new constitution coming into effect, the term is extended to 7 years, and President Mirziyoyev gets to zero out or reset his already 2 terms, half of which he has served in fact in the second term, and he gets 2 additional terms to be president. Of course, there could be elections, there could be candidates against him. A lot of people are asking, is this referendum really about democracy, or is it about President Mirziyoyev tightening his grip, his control? Is there a concern somewhere that when you have a president in office for almost 4 terms, it could in fact be contradictory to the spirit of democracy?
As an ordinary citizen and as an independent media expert, I should say that if he started something new era, as we call New Uzbekistan, he has to follow it and he has to finish what he started already. Let's start talking about this point. So if we have, for example, a lot of changes nowadays, it cannot be ended as we wished, because what we have since he came into the power, there are a lot of changes, even recent international conference in New Delhi. It was organized by the India Central Asia Foundation. Our colleagues from not only Uzbekistan, from neighboring countries like Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, they were talking about political and economic reforms in Uzbekistan. It's kind of the center of Central Asia. So I think the seriousness of the issue is we are not just responsible at this stage, not only for this country itself, but for whole region. That's why we have to, I think, keep up these reforms on the track, and we have to see what will happen next.
So you think that if President Mirziyoyev were to go out of office, the reforms would stop?
Not at all, but I think the logical continuation will be smoothly if the one power, one man, one politician will keep this line. But except that, there was a lot of freedom given to the media. For example, what he said recently, by the way, he said if the local governors, if the hakims, we say them, if they don't want to talk media openly, he's not my friend, he said, but we didn't hear this kind of announcement before. So he gives us more strength, we can go to anywhere and open the door and ask any kind of question. That's what we need, the journalists.
Does he do press conferences often? Does he answer questions from the press?
Yes, he answers. He meets every time when he visits local areas. For example, recently he was in Bukhara, Samarkand, and in Fergana Valley. He always calls journalists, come to me, and we have to talk. We have to talk and openly what kind of questions you have. He always asks, and also he once he said he not only reads newspapers, I mean traditional media. He also said he's reading social media. What is the opinion of people, what's the mood of the people. I think it's very important.
I think it's interesting because I come from India, where of course we take pride in the fact that we are the world's largest democracy, but in the last 9 years at least our Prime Minister hasn't actually taken a press conference. We have not been able to ask him direct questions. That's an interesting, in fact, thing to think about. But coming back to President Mirziyoyev, you think he is out of the shadow of a Karimov, and despite being his protege, why did he choose to go on a completely different path?
I think he knew our problems from inside. That's why I think he was the best candidate for this job. Because he knew all economic problems. Even we had a black market for currencies. Have you heard about? I don't know.
Yeah.
So we had these kind of problems. If you go to the bank, you always had to show your own passport. You have to wait for 1 hour, 2 hours, or even 7 hours. But nowadays, if you go to any bank, any private or government bank, they're open and they don't have any different rate. So it's the same, it's just one thing. And a lot of people, foreigners, tourists are coming, flowing to Uzbekistan, because he said they can come. I think more than 60 countries, citizens of more than 60 countries can come to Uzbekistan without any visa. But we before we didn't have. And regarding the investors, of course, when the investor come with $1 to Uzbekistan, he wants to get back $2 at least. So the currency exchange problem also solved. Of course, it might be small things, but for local people, it's very important.
Would you say that it is actually Uzbekistan today that is shaping up the foreign policy of entire Central Asia? That to an extent perhaps there was an isolation for many years, but now the region is coming out of that isolation. It has come out of that isolation.
I know what you mean by saying isolation, because we felt the isolation, real isolation, because Uzbekistan is double-locked country. We don't have sea, and our neighbors also have not any sea. So if we don't have good relationship with our even neighbors in Central Asia, how we can go to even India, to let's say China or Russia, any kind. So the priority for Uzbekistan's foreign policy is now to have good connection with neighbors, with Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, even with Afghanistan, with its Taliban government. We are talking to them. We are working with everybody. We are opening up to new investors. We are opening to the world, let's say.
But as you are talking to the Taliban, in Afghanistan, there is also a deep wariness, there is also a deep concern, because you have one trading point with Afghanistan. In Tarmez, you have Afghan students coming in, their education is taken care of. And again, for the viewers, for the listeners of this podcast, when you talk about the Uzbekistan borders. If you look at the map, basically Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, the three of them, it's kind of a triangular point, and they share a border with Afghanistan. The Islam that we see in this region is very different from the Islam that is propagated by the Taliban, the extremism, the radical violence, the terrorism. Are you worried that that could come back into the region, that could seep into the region? You have the Taliban banning young girls, women from going into colleges. You have the complete hijab culture out there. Is Uzbekistan worried about it?
Our point is very, how to say, concrete towards the Taliban government, because when we started talking to Taliban regime, they promised us that they will have all minorities in the government, all ethnic groups, including, of course, in the northern part there are millions of Uzbeks are living. Regarding women also, they promised us, and also the world community, they promised they will be having new government, with the participations with all those groups. But now, from the Uzbekistan's viewpoint, we have to talk to them. We have to continue talking to them, because they are neighbors. They are neighbors. For example, let's say for local business people in Termez, in the southern of Uzbekistan, there is a bridge, as you know, friendship. We call it Dostlik. So through this Dostlik bridge, we always selling goods, even small things like vegetables and etc. Even eggs. So for small business, there is not at all any kind of difference who's governing, Taliban or other regime in Afghanistan. They were selling goods each other, but still doing this. But nowadays, at least we have to know what are they thinking about, what are their plan, to what they promised 2 years ago when you came to the power. Are they going to change their plans towards women and freedom, other freedoms? And the other concerning issue, I was talking about it in New Delhi recently when I participated India Central Asia Foundation's international seminar. I was talking about water issues in Central Asia, because if we have some days, maybe, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years after, if we have kind of regional conflict among us, it will be regarding the water issue, water problem. Now, maybe you heard already, Taliban is digging new canal. It's called Kosh Cooper, Takhta Cooper, I don't know real name, but again, they're taking water from Amudarya. In natural way, of course, they have right, because every bordering country has a right. It's a gift from Mother Nature, we say, right? We are like brothers. They can drink today, tomorrow we can drink. But at this point, what they started, they didn't finish, for example, digging canal. They didn't have cement there, but they already taking this water. Because of they didn't put the concrete on the base of the canal, the water is disappearing, and that's why we want to help them to build this canal as a modern canal. So because for Uzbekistan it's very important, because the part of Uzbekistan, especially the northern part, like Bukhara, Khwarezm, where I'm from, or Nukus, the Karakalpakstan, these areas are the lower parts. So what we have water, if the water will stop there, what they will drink. And especially Khwarezm area, they are still cultivating rice. without water we cannot cultivate any rice. So that can be very how to say dangerous in the future. So we have to be very clear on the water issue also.
So just one final question, because you mentioned Karakul, Pakistan, and there last year we saw basically this is a province towards the northwest, which has autonomy, which has an ethnic minority community. And when the consultation process was on for the new referendum, just to let you know, there were 220,000 suggestions sent in by people through multiple stakeholding processes. One of the idea was to kind of abrogate or redraw the autonomy of this region. So there were massive protests. It was a rare protest that happened, massive protest. There were rioting. At least 18 people died in July last year. Finally, President Mirziyoyev had to take a step back and say that this is off the referendum table. So just give us your thoughts in conclusion. Is that issue sort of sorted for now? Is it only a temporary sort of a calm, or is this an issue that can flare up anytime again?
As a journalist, as a media researcher, I must tell that there was a lack of communication. Every referendum, every kind of changes should be open and should be talked with the people and should be discussed with local people. So I think there was some miscommunication during that process. That's why people didn't understand what was going on, and they just pulled it out, the problem, But nowadays I can say that we have to work on that issue, because Karakul, Pakistan is a part of Uzbekistan, modern Uzbekistan, and a lot of Uzbeks are living there. A lot of Khwarezmians, where I am from, we are just neighbor. We cannot be apart, because in my family we have Karakul Pak sister-in-law. We've been living for centuries together. How can we be separated? So it's for me it's not logical. We have to keep up living together with Karakul Paks, I think.
And just in conclusion, what do you see as the more important change that has happened in India-Uzbekistan relations, and what is the importance of India right now for Central Asia?
The importance of Central Asia is huge, because for example, India has a great power on IT technologies or pharmaceutics, but still we don't use this potential. Also, we can also import things from India or export things to India, for example, dry fruits and etc. For example, there are new universities coming to Uzbekistan, like MIT and others. So why not? Why other universities should not come to Uzbekistan? They have to come. And also we have to learn, for example, let's say English language, because through English language we can go to the world. India has very good English teachers, so why they should not come to Uzbekistan and teach English? So that will be another point, And to my mind, at this point, we have to also develop the business connections to build up some maybe new alternative transport corridors. Like our experts were recently talking on in Mumbai, I think, regarding Chobahar. So we have to build up more stronger business connections with India.
You think this new referendum, new constitution will also help improve India-Uzbekistan relations?
Of course, it will be very helpful for bilateral relations, because Uzbekistan is becoming more open to the world.
It's interesting that in the new constitution, in fact, for the first time, I'm told there are rules that have been put in that say not just that Uzbekistan actually seeks good, friendly, peaceful relations with everybody, but also Uzbekistan's urge to try and chart out a strategically autonomous path where it will have relations with everybody, a kind of a dehyphenated relationship, something that India has actually managed to do when it comes to its relationship with US and Russia on the other hand, or be it with Iran and Israel. So that's something that's also a part of the constitution. As I end, let me also tell my viewers, if you're planning in fact to come to Uzbekistan, there may be slight flight issues. There are direct flights from Delhi. It's just a 3-hour flight. It's a beautiful country. I've been to Bukhara, to Samarkand, historic ancient places, and I've been eating and eating and eating. How do you live with so much of eating?
Okay. We have a lot of, by the way, a lot of food, Indian food here, also Indian restaurants in Samarkand. We love Indian food, for example.
What is your favorite food?
Chicken masala.
Chicken masala.
Yes, I love it. Basmati. Just yesterday I bought basmati because before we didn't have any basmati rice here.
Oh.
Yes, but we have Indian restaurants. We have even Indian cuisines, Indian cooking clubs, and etc. So I think historically we are very close to each other.
And I am told that in fact frozen buffalo and mangoes from India will also soon find their way into the Uzbekistan market, because there have been agreements to the extent. I love the rotis. Okay. I love all the naans. I love the rotis. Highly recommended for anybody tuning into this podcast. You don't want to miss out on the bread basket. But thank you so much, Dr. Alimov, for talking to me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was my pleasure to talk to you, to my alumni, and also to your viewers, and saying namaste from Tashkent to everyone. Thank you.
That's lovely, and this is not the end of the podcast. You heard the views of what's happening within Uzbekistan and how Uzbekistan looks at India. But what about India looking at Central Asia? What are the kind of power plays that India is wary about? I talk to my next expert on the podcast. Stay with us.